What is up, everybody? Welcome back for another episode of the Fit 40 podcast. I got another awesome guest today in the incredible lineup that it has been. And this guy is no exception because he is jam packed with mindfulness tips, with perspective, with just like when you think seasoned coach, like what they sound like, this is the guy. And I was actually on his podcast, the Limitless Life podcast with Kyle Smith. So I had a bit of a fun time talking to him. We got into a great conversation, and I'm like, dude, you got to come on mine now. So here he is, the one and only Kyle Smith.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it a ton.
Happy to have you on, man. So for everybody listening, I always have to catch myself because like me and Kyle were having a great conversation before I hit record, and I'm like, oh crap, I gotta hit it. We can't lose all this magic. But to be totally transparent, I was just talking about a possible upcoming live action Disney movie. So that may be the direction this goes in, but I'll try and keep it on point.
I love it.
Right? Yeah.
I absolutely love it. That's awesome.
So let's start from the beginning because I know from like checking out your stuff, it's really focused on like the mindfulness stuff, the business and everything like that. But there's not too much about you. So let's dive into the person that is Kyle Smith. Why don't you let the people know, like, how did you get into fitness, nutrition, and all that?
All the above. I got into it for because of an experience that I had. So looking back, it was maybe not the best cues, like the best instruction when it comes to how to exercise and stuff like that. But it was a very, very positive experience to have nonetheless. And it was before I was a personal trainer even, and I've been doing it for like actually it's August, so it's probably been almost 12 years now.
Oh, wow.
About 11 or 12 years, like over a decade now. And before that, I wanted to pursue culinary arts. I wanted to be a chef. And I'm not sure if you know this, but the restaurant industry is not exactly it doesn't exactly come along with the healthiest habits. And
Wait, you mean to tell me that chain smoking and basically stressing yourself beyond belief every night is not good for your health?
Absolutely. Honestly, I almost consider the restaurant industry similar to the rock star industry, where it's just a bunch of, it's like the band Motley Crue, but like all the time, and it's for a couple hours, and it's just you go in, crush it, and you still hang out at the restaurant afterwards for a majority of folks.
Yeah.
So I was familiar with working out, and I was always consistent with working out, but I wanted just more vision, more structure. So I had the habit, but I didn't have the direction. And even if you have a habit without a direction, it's still never going to be as much. You're not going to be able to squeeze as much juice out of the orange. And I wanted to have all around just better well-being. So from my philosophies obviously evolved from that point, where I recognized I just wanted structure, but what I found in it is purpose and a broader vision of what people could be. And being that I was always drawn to like the Merlins, the Yodas, the teachers, the councils, the Gandalfs, Lord of the Rings reference from what we were talking about earlier. And I really enjoy being that teacher. And I think that whenever there's that, there has to be their own story first. So that was that teacher at that time, introduced me to a cool different experience, and just learned how to become a personal trainer. Then I became a personal trainer and just got a job at a big box gym. And then from there, the rest is, here we are.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, like how a lot of the people that have made it so far in the game to this point all pretty much came from big box gyms. Like I feel like I'm in such a minority with the small group training model, but like if you want to learn how to do it on your own, like big box kind of sounds like the way to go.
Yeah, it usually, it's easier to start out at a big box gym because it has if you don't have the familiarity of how to get clients, or if you don't even know how to train clients, that's the best place to start, because it's just a matter of volume at that point. So what I think people don't really ponder is the amount of volume that not only do they do physically, but the skill sets that they have as well. And just over time, you just naturally become better at things the more you practice it. There's a 1-to-1 ratio. And if someone wants to get 10 times better, 10x better at something, for their output, they want to try to maintain 10x input to balance that out. And it's like a 1-to-1 ratio. It's just more people want to take more than they're willing to give.
Yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to that, like when you, I guess, work with somebody, when you focus on the giving aspect, like what is it that you think that most people need when it comes to coaching? Like what is that thing that people are in desperate need of that they might not even know that they need, but you see it makes a huge difference?
An informed decision. So they only understand one perception and one perspective. So it's similar to affiliations. So if you're spending a lot of time around people that are where you want to go, then you're going to become that person just by hanging around people. But if people do not have the autonomy to create boundaries and to make their space so that they can maintain their energy or be energy neutral rather than super high wound up and super low, if they're energy neutral, then they're going to have the opportunity of growing from that point. And if they have that autonomy, they can keep their space from people that are not fueling them and not giving them or providing energy. There's energy vampires. Everyone's heard of energy vampires.
Is that a big box reference?
No, yeah, no.
That one member that talks your ear off.
Oh, yeah. Honestly, yeah, that's fair. That's a good point too. Yeah, it's. I think until people become more self-aware of who or how people, sorry, I believe that when people become more self-aware, or they just learn how to develop the skill of self-awareness and looking at themselves from an objective point of view, they're able to then feel how they feel around other people. Do they feel energized or do they feel drained? Is kind of the main point if you want to go to like levels of extremes, and then everything in between there. So what I think a coach provides is just that external set of eyes to be able to coach someone on how to coach themselves into the future. It's just a teaching process of developing that internal coach so that people are not focused on what they know now. They just develop the skills. And I think that when we work with coaches, oftentimes, more often than not, if the coach's mess is their message, or if the coach is understanding of what they were able to get through, or the skills and tactics they were able to utilize in order to change their own circumstances, it brings that personal aspect that no program, no software, no reorganizing of a program will ever be able to match. But it creates like that opportunity to create breathing room for the client, because realistically all the information is already out there, and it's just accountability and then a different relationship to create more of an informed decision, that they don't have to stick to what they've always done, and they certainly don't have to stick to what they've always done because their friends have also just stuck to what they've done, or their family, or how I like to put it is like your parents, your professors, your preachers, your priests, your premiers, your prime ministers, your professionals, there's a whole bunch of alliterations for it. But just because other people are stuck in a certain way doesn't mean the subjective self, objectively, they don't have to. And the subjective self has to decide, yeah, I want to actually experience something different. And having that coach just has that extra perception, or removes some perceptions.
Yeah. Absolutely. Very well put. And I like how you touched on the whole energy concept, like being energy neutral, because they're like, it's pretty clear, like you don't want to be around people that suck your energy. But I think a lot of times too, when people reach out for help, they expect somebody to give them their energy and to like almost become dependent, like these rah coaches or like the drill sergeants. It's like they get you going, but how do you do that for yourself?
For that one, that's actually a cool one. So there's a couple things just popped in my brain for that one. That was a pretty sweet question.
Hey, run with it, man.
Got a couple layers on it, so I just have to organize stuff. So with that thought process, run it through me one more time, just so I can latch on to
I
something.
got you, man. So I was getting at the energy concept, just basically saying like there's vampires, they suck your energy. We don't like those people, but there's also the people that get you so fueled up that you almost create a sense of dependency.
Mm-hmm. Right. So in turn, when you develop a dependency, you become the energy vampire. So it's having that awareness of, I just became that energy vampire. And the way it really comes down to is developing the relationship with the self. If we're always like, if we're infatuated or if we're resentful, that's going to be that peaks and valleys of emotions. The main way that I recognize that we can find neutral energy is by regulating the relationship with the self from an internal standpoint. So if I think of it like if you have compassion rather than judgment. So if you have I think of compassion and love kind of in the same realm. And so if you think of your heart as a bucket, there's people that are willing to pour into your bucket, but they're only willing to pour so much. And this goes for either people that are dependent or sucking energy, because both of them are just avoiding the self. It's just avoiding the point of their own. They just don't want to deal with their own shenanigans, because the hardest thing to do is to look inwards and reflect, because our projections are also reflections. So when we can decrease those amount of reflections, where we can recognize behaviors in other people that we may not find to be very savory, why is it that we don't find those behaviors to be savory? And it's because we are guilty of doing that as well, which every human being on the planet is both kind and cruel. Every human being on the planet is happy and sad. Every human being on the planet is both fearful and fearless. They're courageous and cowardice. So we embody all these different things, but it's when we find that duality between the two, rather than being, there was a term that I really liked on this one, like absolutists, but like an absolute in the sense of just staying with, I only want to be happy all the time. And if I'm not happy and I'm experiencing sadness, and I specifically say experiencing sadness because emotions are a short-term thing. So it's not I am sad, because then you're connecting, and then people have to defend what they identify with. So if it's I am sad and you're like, you don't seem to be sad, I'll tell you how I'm sad, because I have to defend my perception of self. So we just need to we just got to be careful of those things that we say. And so if we think of, going back to the other part then, if we think of that heart as a bucket, the focus, in my opinion, the focus should be on filling our own heart bucket to the point that it's overflowing and other people gets what's overflowed, rather than trying to take other people's. Honestly, a majority of people, I don't think very many people have like that overflowing heart. So we're just trading water, and we're just trying to take little bits that we can. But when we can look inwards and develop the relationship with the self, then we find ourselves exploding with compassion, exploding with love. And I think that's something that's like, it's palpable as well. Like you can feel it.
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, as soon as you said that, like I haven't heard it put that way. And I was like, hell yeah. Like, because you hear people talk about filling the cup, and you're like, you got to fill your cup before you can fill anybody else's. But it's like, why do you have to sacrifice your cup? Why not just keep filling it to the max, and then you are just running off great vibes? Like you are basically filling it up to the point where it's like, all right, I need other people's cups to go underneath me so I can like give you some of what I'm getting here. Because I know.
That
Oh, go
100%.
ahead.
No, that was 100%. Like that was, yeah.
Yeah, because I know that, like, I mean, me working with like mostly moms, definitely so many guilty of giving up not even like a part of their cup, but their entire cup to their kids, to their spouse, to their work, to like helping their family out, like basically just spreading themselves so thin that there's really no room for them. So
Mhm.
I'm assuming over the years you've had clients like that too. Like, how do you like to coach them through, like somebody listening right now? Like, how do you set up the boundaries? Like, how do you put them in a place where they have more ownership over their themselves and their health?
In the situation where it's like a family, or is that would
Yeah,
be the
let's take
context that you're thinking?
like a mom with kids, for example, like in her like 40s
Beautiful.
or 50s, like still working, not retired.
One thing would be, my thought process would be, uh, are you, is there a fear of taking care of the self? And I find that oftentimes it's just the fear of what other people think. Because in my mind, if a mom's not taking care of herself, or if a father's not taking care of himself, then in my mind, that's like a that's a that's a tough place to be, because if the habits are not changed in the present, and at least asking for support, so asking for the people that you know that you can care for, that trust, that have your best intentions at heart, that are kind of like your ride and dies. I call it the fellowship. So fitness, finance, fellowship, and fulfillment.
That
Fellowship,
Tolkien
the people that you
reference.
spend the most time with. Yeah, buddy. Yeah.
I was waiting for it.
Yeah, I'm just a freaking nerd. So I put it in my program. I'm like, I talk to nerds often, obviously. And so when it comes to the fellowship, like, it takes a tribe to raise a child, kind of idea. And I think that it takes a tribe to become better as well. And people believing or having the narrative that they have to struggle is, first and foremost, just because other people struggle doesn't mean subjectively a person has to struggle. They may struggle to a certain degree, but I also believe that the narratives that are just perpetuated all around us about how something should be hard, it just becomes hard because we say it's hard. But then we step back and it's like, it's actually not that hard if you have the right systems in place, or the right conversations, or you just set intentions and boundaries. And you're speaking to your affiliations to be able to support you and saying, hey, I gotta go to the gym for 30 minutes. Would you be able to like take care of my kid? And then there's another thing as well, is like, if, and I'm just going with like hypothetical, I'm just going everywhere. So
Hey,
just letting
go
you know on
for it,
this one,
man.
because I kind of have a couple cool ideas on
I'll
this
give
one.
you the wheel. You go.
Nice. And so I think that there's I like the saying where everything is figure outable. That's one part. And then another part is that if a problem has a solution, then we don't have a problem, we have choices. It's just which degree of choice are you willing to make that is also in alignment with where you want to go. Because a lot of folks are not like taking care of themselves because it's okay to not take care of themselves. And we always have really good excuses to not take care of ourselves, but we're
Mm-hmm.
not thinking of the long-term consequences as well. So I think that as well, I'll go with the solution first, then I'll go with the context behind it. So if there's a parent that wants to go work out, then simply find a daycare that has a kids thingy. And now that would be like, oh, but there's not one close. The closest one is 45 minutes away. Okay, well, does your kiddo have two naps? Does your kiddo have two naps? And then you can have 45 minutes one way, do a 30-minute workout, and 45 minutes on the back end. So that way your kid's napping on that time too. And that's just a hypothetical. Like, I'm just like brainstorming, because people want to have like objections, but I like to just I'm very solutions oriented. And another thing as well is like, right now may seem like it's really chaotic, but if people are not able to create those habits when things are chaotic, they're not imposing order on the chaos, then when things are smooth, we're still going to have the habit of chaos. So order and chaos are habitual. And if there's chaos around us, then it's hard for us to see that. And that goes into the other part where having a coach obviously helps impact that, because you're seeing it objectively where there's just other solutions. Like I like it. I like telling people that things are not as hard as people make it seem. Just decrease the intensity and increase the duration of time. And that's pretty much it. People want things hard and they want things fast, but they're not set up for it. So it's just a risky business in that case.
Yep.
But I also think that if a parent is not taking care of themselves, then I think it's unfair that in the future their kid's going to have to take care of them. Because if they're not taking care of themselves, maintenance is progress. And if we're not progressing on our maintenance, then we're just going to get progressively worse.
Mm-hmm.
Like maintaining progress, like progress or maintenance being progress, is like my baseline foundation, because I'm longevity focused. I'm not thinking of how I feel now because it's irrelevant for what I'm going to feel 50 years from now. So I have that in mind too, but it's setting the intention. It's like, I also think there's a lot of things too. It's like, I think people also do not know how to parent themselves. So that's difficult too. So we're just really impulse driven. And I truly think, at least for myself, but I truly think just from like watching folks too, is until the point that we choose to make the conscious decision to show up differently, we will show up for our own like inner child to the same degree that our parents showed up for us, unless we consciously change it. And if we don't consciously change it from an internal standpoint, where, let's say, for example, I shared with my younger self like hugs, or I had more compassion, right? Rather than judgment.
Mm-hmm.
That now positively impacts my external relationships. But it's just a different skill set, because it goes back to the other part too, is like, we only know what we know. And if we don't know what we don't know, so if we're only aware of how our parents raised us, we can, and if we are not mindful about what we like and dislike, like, I think the best way to keep any human being alive is to adopt a characteristic that you want to embody yourself, because then that keeps on going. That's like how I handle grief in death. That's a dark one, but figured, why not?
Hey,
it's in there.
Hey, I mean, we all have our own ways of processing and making sense of everything, but
Totally.
that's a big point right there, because I know, at least in the fitness space, it's so common to almost like guilt the parents a little bit and say like, oh, your kid deserves this. Like, how dare you not like take care of yourself? But it's not really that. It's like, why not take care of yourself so that you can be the parent you want to be? Not because you're like owing it to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's
I think
where
that
a lot of people like have issues with it, because they're like, if I want something, especially the moms, it's like, God forbid they do anything for themselves. It's like, oh, I can't do that. Like, every little bit of me has to go to my kid.
I think that's a risky place to be, man. That would be a really tough place to be, because then people are just drained. And if it's not, and even if someone doesn't want to do like a workout, doing like a form of physical activity or something that recharges, where people are mindful of it, it's not a badge of honor to destroy yourself it's no, that's too aggressive. I'm not going to go with that one.
But I mean,
But
in that vein, like, I don't want to drop that
yeah.
completely, because that is definitely one of the recurring themes on this show, is the fact that you don't have to kill yourself. Like, people think that like, if you don't struggle, then you're not good enough, or that it's your effort is not good enough if you don't give every little bit of like sweat, blood, and tears into whatever you're doing. And it's like, that's cool for the hardos, but like, for the 99.9% of people that don't wrap their ego up in how much they can work out, like, it really doesn't matter. It's what's right for you.
Totally. I totally agree with that. And honestly, it's like defining what that intention is, defining what it is that is right for an individuals. Because I think like principles there's principles of progress that are consistent all across the board, where it's taking care of the mental fitness along with the physical fitness. It's taking care of the internal relationship and then the external relationships, and then it's finding that sweet spot and being mindful of, man, it's just like we only see the hardcore people because they're just like, they just make for really good content. Like there's not many David Goggins. There's people who are really close, but
Yep.
there's not many David Goggins. And I think it's like the main lesson of some peeps that are like really hardcore is that is consistent across the board. But it's the volume. Like some people have it cranked up to 11, but we also have the option to crank it down to 3 just to give ourselves the opportunity to do it.
Yep.
And I think that's the main point, is like people just are cool. And I think that there's more like the kind of story. And I think stories that we tell ourselves are very important. But the story that it's like, oh, I gotta do it at 11 or like not at all. Just go for a walk and have those. But the thing is like we gotta get out of our own way in order to also just follow the the things that recharges us, and we're just really stubborn to recharging ourselves, I think.
Yeah.
Now I'm kind of
Well,
thinking about it, I'm pondering it.
I think it gets back to what you were talking about before with like the dichotomies and everything. It's like for some reason, because of these hardcore messages, I do think that a lot of people fall into that trap of, if I can't give it 100,000%, I'm just going to do nothing. When there's never that secondary thought of, well, that walk would be better than not doing anything. No, that's not good enough. No, I gotta kill myself. I'm a masochist. Otherwise, it's not worth it.
Or people just don't do it because they're perfectionists.
I
They're like, oh, I have to have the perfect program. I actually think that perfectionists should not be considered perfectionists because, one, there's no such, can I swear?
yes.
Fucking thing as perfection. Like,
It's an impossible
it's
standard
impossible.
to live up to. And
There's
honestly, I
there's
think it's a
actually,
cop
go
out.
ahead.
I really do. I really think
Agreed.
it's a very nice way to get off the hook, because it's not I'm lazy. It's not I don't want to do the work to plan. It's not I don't want to ask somebody for help. It's, oh, I'm just so good. Like, if it's not my quality, then I just can't do it. My standard is just too damn high.
I think the perfectionists are just professional procrastinators. Like perfectionists are some of the, and I would say as like one of the folks that have like self-labeled themselves as a perfectionist, at some point I just had to look in the mirror and I was like, you're not a perfectionist. You're just a scared procrastinator. That's it. You're not a perfectionist at all. You have all the skills, you have the characteristics and traits. Objectively, you understand that. But if you're not doing anything with that, if there's no application, if there's no value to the human race, that's kind of like my metric, is just being a good human being,
Mm-hmm.
then you're not a perfectionist. You're just a procrastinator. And then at some point, some people, they procrastinate long enough that they never get to see any of their visions come to fruition. And that's actually something that like this is a finite time. Kendra and I were going for our date night walk yesterday, and I said to her, it's kind of interesting because if you look at the span of the universe, and I apparently it's doubled, it's like 22 billion years old or something like that. Like it's a long time. So if you think of the universe as 22 billion years old, and I'm only 33, I've experienced more time not existing than existing. I don't know where I was going with that one, but it was kind of a cool thought. But yeah, I forgot. I just popped up and I was like, I don't even know where I was going with that
Somebody is
one.
going to hear that and just think about it the rest of their car ride, like, whoa.
Totally. Well, it's kind of neat. It's like we have the, oh right, now I remember where I was going with that. So it's like I already know what it's like to not exist. because we exist before birth and we exist after death. But this is finite, and we get this opportunity to create vision. We have manifestation. If you look around, the things that we're talking on right now, were all created once in the mind and then in reality. And if you look around, like it's crazy. Like we can create light at night. We have created the ability to pollute the sky from light pollution. We give off so much light that we're able to see a couple stars in the sky. That's from us manifesting ideas. And that's the thing that people, I think, don't recognize is everything that we see was to resolve a discomfort that we experience. So if we're able to look in the mirror and we're able to see or feel or acknowledge and have the self-awareness to understand what we have discomfort in, we know how to start, because we always want to go for energy neutral. Like our bodies just want to go to energy neutral, and like homeostasis. Like we just want to go to like a base level and we bring it up a little bit, and our brains, and we get the benefits of that. And then we go down a little bit, and down is important too, because if we didn't experience the down, we wouldn't know how good the up is. But if we didn't experience the up, we wouldn't understand how peaceful presence is, right? Because being too high is tough, being too low is tough. Neutral has the least amount of resistance. So we're not going like RPMs, and we're not running on empty. It's like, no, we're going like a nice casual scenic drive.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that.
Keeping it in like third gear, nice and level.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's freaking super chill, man.
I know that when you were like talking about that, one of the things I couldn't stop thinking about is like when I was like starting to get into content creation, like, which is like, if you want to see a bunch of quote unquote perfectionists, talk to people that have yet to make that first post.
Yeah.
But
yes. It's like, fuck, I'm so good, I'm not even going to post once. I'm a fucking boss.
Right? It's like my ideas are too good, man. But when I was getting out of that mental space, which it can definitely translate into something like this, it's like you kind of got to put yourself in that mindset of like, I'm in good company if I try and fail. I'm in really bad company if I never try because I'm a perfectionist or because I'm too scared. That's like all the people who have gotten to their deathbed at like 90, 100 and look back and said, damn, I wish I really tried this. Those are the perfectionists.
Absolutely. I think that I forget how the saying goes completely, but I'm going to paraphrase it. But it's something like, and I was reminded because I walked by a graveyard not that long ago, like last week sometime, for one of my long walks. And it's someone said that the graveyard is the wealthiest place on the planet because that's where so many dreams have gone and died. They never came to fruition.
Like the $1 million ideas.
Like the $1 million ideas. They just like left with the people. And that's craziness, man. Like,
yeah,
craziness.
And that reminds me,
I know where I was going with that one too.
That's cool. That's cool because you're giving me a bunch of good ideas and remembering stuff. Because I was listening to John Goodman's podcast, I think it was yesterday or day before, and they were talking about AI, like what it's doing and how it's gonna put a bunch of people out of their jobs. And he's like, that's gonna happen, but it's also going to free up a lot of people who have been in these shitty jobs that they don't enjoy and don't get fulfilled by. And they're finally going to have that push to do what they actually want to do. So as horrible as it is, people losing their jobs and everything, for the people that sack up, for lack of a better term, and like finally do what they wanted to be doing this entire time, it's going to be the greatest thing on earth.
I agree with that. I would argue that AI is only going to steal jobs of folks that don't want to evolve along with things. And I think that our environment is moving faster and faster and faster, just from like early 1900s to when Industrial Revolution really started pumping. Honestly, I think I chat with someone else, but I recognize where industrial development and our technology and our science, all of it's still on a trajectory of evolving. And I've noticed that humans have plateaued in that development. So where there's like, we're not using, like, AI is just already like evolved 10 years and we're not evolved to that point. We're not keeping up. And I think that when we have that like symbiotic relationship, that duality of technology and humanity, that's when there is going to be a balance. But when people are trying to fight what's kind of happening and trying to adjust their objective world to fit their subjective reality, then that's where people find that conflict, that internal conflict. And I think that AI, just like any other tool, right? Just like any other tool, it takes skills to practice and develop it. I don't think it's going to steal jobs, but I think that it would be in people's best interest to maybe kind of look at the progress that they've been making, and then just seeing how they can integrate rather than conflict. Because integration, a friend of mine actually says that integration will always happen. Integration is not a choice, but how you integrate is. And I think that when people are capable of seeing the use of a tool rather than being against a tool, then that's really important. I also think that we could really like turn down the dial from 20 to like 2 on our technological advancements, because we're just like, I think the general population is just not able to keep up with the information that's coming out. And I love it. I like this stuff. So I know like I'm pretty decent. Like my thought process when AI first came out was, holy shit, I could actually have an AI assistant that I can utilize for almost everything in a business. Like you can have an AI assistant coach. The thing that people don't realize is like, if you look at the one thing that no technology will ever be able to replicate is the personality and the consciousness of a person, or the soul. I think consciousness and soul are the same thing. So I want to clarify that. But no one's ever going to be, there's not going to be an AI that's going to have my consciousness. I can make them sound really, really damn close. Like I could actually, if you made a bunch of questions and I typed out a bunch of answers, we'd be able to get AI to use our images to do the exact same conversation that we have, but people would be able to tell that there's no heart in it.
Yeah.
Like you can listen to some YouTube videos and you're like, that's not human. And you just know. And it feels like, it's not bad, but you're just aware of it.
Yeah. That's
and
actually,
you can have the tonality, you have the fluctuations, you have that, and that's good.
That's actually what they started doing with Arnold's Pump Club. If you've ever heard of that, like they put it on AI just to see what happened. And when you listen, like you can, like we're still in the years of like, we're going to be able to differentiate AI to human, because our bullshit meter is going to go off. There's like a built-in bullshit meter into every human, some better than others. But like for the most part, we're going to be able to tell for the time being.
I totally agree. Well, it's intuition too, right? Because the way I look at it too is if I'm feeling out, and going with the tactical part, how to feel out people's energies. It's not just how you feel. It's not just about feeling energized or feeling drained. I think it's also when you recognize when the head, the heart, and the intuition, when you have those connected, then that's more information to create decisions. And I think that's one thing that with that bullshit meter, I think that intuition and understanding how to feel out our gut, and our body is our subconscious. Like our subconscious is developing before our consciousness actually comes really into play. It's around the age of 7 where we really start developing our consciousness. Before that point, we're just all subconscious. It's amygdala, and we haven't developed the prefrontal cortex in order to make any rational decisions. And that's just where we're at in that development. And so I think that this is a cool thought. I actually think that we're just not speaking the same language as our body. But we're hearing things like, think of this one. Excitement and anxiety have the exact same physiological responses. So how is it that people confuse excitement with anxiety, or anxiety, as my friend Leah says?
Can I take a
Excitement and
stab at it
anxiety.
before you give the answer?
Yeah.
Because I
Go for
actually
it.
wrote this down about like 5 minutes ago. I think it's expectation.
Hell yeah.
I think it's expectations that guide a lot of anxiety or excitement. Because excitement, you're like, something good is going to happen. And then anxiety, something bad's going to happen.
Totally. I completely agree with you.
Yes.
So then
Got it.
we understand like that expectation. It's the narrative of that expectation. So let's say we're going to a roller coaster. We feel excitement and we're like, ooh, giddy, pupils dilated, adrenaline, heart pumping a little bit quicker. All same indicators of excitement and anxiety. The only differentiator is another person outside of us who is usually a person of authority. And when we were a kid, we don't know any better. But then that person who also doesn't know any better is saying, that's not excitement. That's anxiety. That's fear. So then you just stole excitement and you imposed fear. And that's lame.
Yep.
So that's why there's the stories. That's the stories where it's like there's the physiological response and we just disconnect the actual narrative. It's like, is it anxiety or is it excitement? Okay, is it fearful? What's the fear? The fear is usually ethereal. It doesn't even make sense. Like, there's no logic in most of our fears. Fear is an acronym in my mind for false evidence appearing real. And then fail is an acronym for a faithful attempt in learning. So when you combine both of those, if you're going to do a public speak or talk or something, or if you're talking even on a podcast, I would say that having a podcast is the time that I've had the most constructive conversations. But at the same time, every time I hop on one, I'm like a little nervous, but it's excitement.
Yeah.
It's not anxiety. It's like, oh, well, what if you forget what you say? I forget what I say all the time. So does everyone else. Well, what if you, I don't know, what if this? Well, that happens to everyone else too. And I don't know. I think that people put so much pressure. I think that there's two parts to it. I think that a couple parts, actually. I think that one, people just, I think generally, unless people have their highest priority value, like at the forefront of their mind, then they're going to they're going to give themselves permission to prevent progress in the present. And it's usually due to a past perpetuation of a past, like, I don't want to say trauma because that's like whooped around too much. I think that's just,
yeah.
When I think trauma, I think, oh yeah, you lost your arm.
I think it's almost like generational fears a little bit. Cause like when you were talking about like how, like when you were going back and forth about how like anxiety and everything kind of is based on a narrative, all I could think about was like that example of like a kid on a playground falls down, looks for mom, and then doesn't cry until mom starts freaking out. It's like, it's learned. Like, yeah, this hurts, but is that a bad thing?
Right? And people are only thinking on that first part because projections. So the parents assuming that kiddo's injured, so that kiddo is also going to learn every time that thing happens, I am going to experience pain.
Mm-hmm.
So how often is it that we actually think, this is a good one? And I was aware of this the other day, which is hilarious, but it was, I walked into the corner of a wall. Great way to start a story.
It's kind of hard to do.
Right? But I was just like, I wasn't paying attention. So I walked into a wall.
Oh, actually, sorry.
Same experience?
I envisioned that in such a different way. I heard you so wrong when I'm like, that's hard to do. I thought you walked like into like a corner that wasn't sticking out.
Oh.
I'm like, wow, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I walked into the
The
the deep part of the corner, not the protruding part of the corner.
Oh, so I
Yeah.
did hear that right.
Yeah, I walked into a corner
The protruding
that
part or the
was
inward part?
the protruding part.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay, yeah, I did hear it
not the
wrong.
inward part. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I'm actually gonna go send myself to detention, and I'm gonna put the dunce hat on, and I'm just gonna go and hang out in the corner, which is fair. So yeah, fair enough. Good clarification though. I'm glad you
Yeah,
clarified. That's
that's how you
so
know
much
it's been
better.
a long day.
Yeah, fair enough. Hey. So when I walked into the corner, same thing, two different situations. Kendra was there and Kendra wasn't there, right? So Kendra wasn't there. Walked into it and I was like, oh, like it was nothing. I didn't even think twice about it. Kendra was there. Oh my god. Oh, it's like it was the exact same thing, but when other people are around and we do something that normally would be really mundane or silly, like walking into a wall, it's like we play it off as if we're more hurt than we really are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's like learned as well. Like that's just something that's learned over time. Because this is kind of a cool thing that I think is neat with human behavior and just development as a whole is when we're only thinking of us now, it's like, oh, we've always been this way. It's like, no, no, no. We had to learn to eat. We had to learn to walk. We had to learn all these different things, just like how I think that we should learn how to think rather than learn what to think. Those are two different things. I think it's very, very important. Where it's a different, and I think that that difference is between challenging our thoughts or confirming our thoughts. How to think is how to challenge the thoughts. What to think is confirming the thoughts that other people have told you to believe. So very few people have their own specific opinion. They actually just adopt opinions. So I think that's very interesting too, is like we don't have to follow along simple same thing as before too. Is like if we're just following the same narratives of our affiliations, the people that we spend the most time with, our fellowship, and our fellowship is like if we're dropping our own standards, then like from our consciousness and our heart and our intuition, there's going to be a misalignment and we're going to find ourselves more miserable, but we're going to want to stick around that misery. One, because we understand that misery, and two, we don't want to leave those miserable people behind. But the best way sometimes to be able to uplift them rather than enable them is to take care of the self and show them how to be a leader of the self rather than saying, hey, you're really awesome. You can do this. And then trying to inspire someone else to develop that leadership in the self. Why not just develop it in the self and lead by example in that way? And I think like when people are not practitioners of the change that they want to see, then they're a hypocrite. Then they're just doing things out of like a pseudo morality. It's like, no, if you want people to be better, then be better yourself. And if you're not bettering yourself, then you're trying to fight against enlightenment or the self-actualization of the self. Like it's coming up with like the best version of yourself. And people, I think that people know that in a subconscious, like maybe empathic way where it's like people know that they are great. But until we decide to be great, we're just going to fight that feeling and we're going to push it down because we may not see ourselves as great in that moment, but we feel that pull towards it oftentimes, I think. Because it goes back to like, we're not speaking the same language as our emotions, or we're just not interpreting them in a more underneath the microscope. I think it's like that. We're looking through a telescope when we could be looking through a microscope to really break down our thoughts. And I like to break it down into functioning or non-functioning opinions. It's like, let's say, for example, it's like, it could be a non-functioning opinion is anything that harms progress, and a functioning opinion is anything that helps progress. Now, this is the cool thing. This is probably where some people get a little crazy, and I like it because I'm fucking nuts.
Go for it.
But the thing that I think is kind of cool with the ability of our brains is the only limitation to our brain is the imposed limitation. And even into old age, neuroplasticity, we can actually strengthen myelination of everything that's going on, of like the what are these things? Synapses and our like neural pathways. There we go. So we get to have the opportunity to be able to change those and modify those. But some people, the more banners that we hold ourselves to, the more we have to defend our identity. So I like to put myself as someone who is not bound by banners. I have the characteristics of a solid, like I would say that I have the characteristics of ADHD. Like if you put if I could fill it out, if I fill out the form, if I went and did the test, I know for a fact they'd be like, here you go. You want some meds? And I'd be like, no.
Yeah, here's some Adderall.
I like my crazy. Yeah. Which honestly, I would give it a try because I'm kind of curious as to what my work output would be like. Like that's actually something I'm like genuinely curious about.
I could just tell you from my own experience, unless you get the right one, it's literally just crack energy and you're just like doing a million things and it's like it's not really focusing anything, but when you find that sweet spot, when you find the right one, it's like, okay, I just need to start doing the thing so I don't end up doing a lot of focus work on something that I should not be doing. Because there are plenty of times where studying turned into laundry or like cooking or something else.
I think I heard a comedian say something like that. He's like, yeah, I don't know if you've heard of this one, but I tried Adderall the other day. My girlfriend gave me Adderall the other day. And yeah, for those of you that are on Adderall, you probably know how dumb of an idea that was. And he's like, I didn't do any of the things I wanted to do, but I was able to count all the nuts and bolts in the house. Something like that. It was just goofy.
Yeah, it's like you have the focus. It just needs chances of it going towards the thing that it should very, very low.
Totally. So for myself, some people are like, well, why is it that you don't get tested? And one reason, the main kind of reason that I really focus on is if I go, then that is another banner that I am going to adopt, because I know how my systems work now. So whether or not I get diagnosed is irrelevant because I already know how to work with the system that's in my brain. And I think that the thing that's really beautiful, I think that ADHD as a whole is actually a beautiful gift. And like what I was talking about earlier about how our environment is evolving faster than us, our consciousness can keep up with our environment. And I think folks with ADHD have the ability to bypass a lot of the slower thinking processes that some folks may have, like some blockers. I think that folks with ADHD have like faster firing pathways, and it's trying to train the system to work for you rather than against you. And I think that's like the main thing that some peeps get kerfuffled with, because there's a really beautiful study or professor that said that, is it attention deficit disorder or is it intention deficit disorder? So if someone has ADHD and they have the right intention, or they have that particular thing that they're into, that they know they have a vision on that they can accomplish, then they're going to focus on it. If someone's not focusing on something they don't give a shit about, then why are they going to put any effort in? Why are they going to put any attention towards something they don't give a shit about?
Yep. And
so I think it's interesting.
I was just going to say, like, with everything, there's always going to be like that, like, end of the spectrum where it's like somebody is so dysfunctional, but like what you just described, I think does represent a lot of people that fall into that banner, that flag, because that's me to a T. It's like, if I don't give a shit about something, I physically can't make myself look at it and absorb it. And it's like you could pound your head against the wall so many times before you're just like, I got to figure out a new game to play.
Yeah, 100%. It's like you're just playing the wrong game. You got like a superpower boost. So if you think of your character, like your character as an avatar, and this is a video game, then
Yeah.
you got like a plus 10 speed, but it may not be physical, it's cognitive. And the processing speed of our mind is, like I said, to the limit that we choose it to be. Oh yeah, let me finish my other part first for the ADHD. So I fit all the characteristics.
This is really feeding
Why do
into
I
the
not?
fact that you said you had ADHD.
I know. Yeah, shit. So the reason that I'm really mindful of tests is I don't want to risk adopting characteristics that I don't presently have, but in an effort to defend a new identity, I have to change who I am now in order to fit those characteristics that I didn't have before.
Yeah. Hey, labeling theory is a
So it's
powerful
like,
thing, man.
well, I don't even know if it's, well, I guess it would fit into the same context of like quantum theory because it's cognitive, right? It's like, it's not Newtonian physics. It's not like the laws of the universe. It's the unlimited. Here's a better way of putting it. If we're looking at the dualities, Newtonian, we are limited to what we can do in this physical reality. Quantum, unlimited, because the limitation could be the expanse of our mind. And I think, oh, that was kind of a cool thought. But but so let me figure out that last part. So when we tell ourselves a story, we're going to stick to the story that we tell ourselves because we're going to defend whatever that story is. And then our body's going to respond to our conscious thoughts. So it's interesting because people always want to change the mind to change the body, or change the body to change the mind, when it's like it's always perpetuated. It's always going, it's cyclical. It's the yin to the yang. But people are just like, oh, I have ADHD, so I can't take care of my health. It's like, that is a load of horse poop. That is like, it just, it's like frustrating because the reason why I think it's frustrating is because like I'm empathetic, I get it. And it's just like, no, you're just listening to your domestication. You're listening to the domestication of like what your parents, preachers, priests, professors, all those authoritative prime ministers, principals, so on and so forth. It's just listening to the domestication of those individuals when realistically, like, it's like a buddy of mine actually put it well. It's rewilding. So it's not rewiring of the mind, it's rewilding and getting back in touch with that balance.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, that was kind of a thought process on that. But I think that people should be mindful of the labels that they associate with, because they have to, even subconsciously, they find themselves having to defend that label. And so that's why I think, like, when we are not bound by banners, we're literally not bound by banners. I look at humanity, like we're all just floating around this rock. And there's a book called Sapiens. I think it's in Sapiens, but the fella broke it down where the only thing that really separates individuals is the flags they wave, is nationality. It is what's really the difference between a Canadian and American, British, African, Australian, Japanese.
We all say about
it's culture.
differently.
And yeah, that's fair, actually. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. But the thing that everyone associates with is that flag that they wave. When realistically, we were all, no matter what someone's kind of theory or belief is from the beginning of the universe, we're all from that same point in time. We're all from that same point in time, right? And we just developed in different ways over time. So it's just the banners that we wave, that we're bound to, that we choose to be bound to, that we're just supporting. And some of those are just not in alignment with ourselves, and we find ourselves doing it out of obligation or expectation. And that's taking the power out of our hands and giving it away to whoever else.
It's kind of like, have you ever like caught yourself when you get sick, and you almost get a little scared of how you identify with being sick. It's like, nope, I'm useless. I can't do anything for myself. Like, I don't know about you, but like when I get to that point where I'm like feeling like crap, I'm like, the comfort I find in kind of like victimizing myself is a little bit scary.
Totally. Well, it's addicting.
Yeah. Because it feels good.
It's
And that's
addicting.
what's scary about it.
Mhm. Exactly. Well, think of it like when people are really wound up as well. Like people that are angry, peace is boring. So people say they want peace, but they don't want
That's why
peace
reality
because
TV
it's boring.
exists. That's why Vanderpump Rules is one of the best
Totally.
shows on television.
Nice. Yeah. And it's like that. It's like people just don't want to experience peace. And being a victim, think of all the empathy. No. I'm not even gonna put in perceived. Okay, here we go. Think of all the perceived sympathy that we get when really we can also view that as pity. But we're seeing it as sympathy because we want to feel good about ourselves. But realistically, we're just pitying ourselves. We're just like, oh, you're so useless. It's like the things that we say to ourselves when we're sick is the exact same things that we want to say to ourselves, like that we say to ourselves subconsciously. But when we're sick, then we are saying to ourselves out loud, oh, this is a cool thought. It's like, yeah, you are sick. You do suck. You're actually embodying everything you think about yourself.
Yeah.
You are down. You are depressed.
You're lazy.
You are sniffling.
You're eating shit.
You are lazy. Yes. And that's like I think in that moment, like catching yourself is very important. And I've definitely, well, just given how I'm describing it, I feel like it definitely shows that I've definitely experienced that as well. And and it's pulling ourselves out of that too. Pulling ourselves out of that like little bit of pittiness that we're experiencing. Super, super, super important. And yeah, I think like once we just decide, it's like I don't want to feel gross, and just changing those words, like, you know what, how I feel right now, is it actually me like actually sick, or is it me just feeling, or is it me just wrongly interpreting physiological responses that I am inducing with my conscious thoughts and stories that I tell myself? It's kind of like that, right?
And that is
I think that's kind of neat. That's a neat thought process.
That is a very good thought to end on, like to keep everybody engaged post conversation. So that'll be the little thinker for everybody for the rest of their car ride. Now, I can't let you off the hook without asking you the question I ask every single guest, and that is, what's your favorite movie and why?
Okay, there's a couple tough ones on that one. That's a really fucking hard question. Legit. But I'm going to go with the first one that came to mind. And it would be The Dark Knight. And not just because of how awesome of a show it is and how big of an influence Batman is, but I also have gotten a lot of work done with The Dark Knight in the background. So for a solid chunk of time, because we don't have a TV anymore, but when we did have a TV, when we did have a TV, I would have The Dark Knight playing in the background. It would be silent because Kendra would still be sleeping, and then I would also be listening to like binaural beats or something. So I spent a lot of time with The Dark Knight, so it very, very much so connects. But I think from like, I also really like Christopher Nolan's directing. So it actually like The Dark Knight encompasses a lot of layers as to what I really admire and appreciate from a comic book adaptation, a work of art and creativity. It has a beautiful mix of art, science, and magic. And the acting was awesome. The character development was awesome. So there's a lot of layers as to why I like it. I do have. May I share one more? Of course. Sweet. And I will say from the like 2006, 7, and 8 area. 2007 specifically, 300, absolutely, like huge inspiration for who I am now. Like the 300 workout, I remember just looking at it. And so that movie also really inspired me into becoming a coach, because that was also one of the movies that had the behind the scenes where it really started establishing that idea of the celebrity training programs that they did behind the scenes. And Mark Twight and Bobby Maximus were the main coaches for the guys in 300. And when I seen the behind the scenes part, and I was like, I want to do that. So the movie 300 also really inspired me to be on the same trajectory that I'm on right now.
It's so fitting that the guy's last name is Maximus.
Right? Yeah, man. Yeah, he actually, it's not his real last name. That's like his UFC name.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
totally.
As much as I don't want to end this conversation, because I could have you on for hours, man, and I don't think I know myself, but I don't think anybody else would be bored because it is always fun chatting, and I definitely have to get you on again. So before we conclude, if everybody's listening and they're like, damn, this Kyle guy, he's got some good stuff going on, I want to see more of it, where can they find you?
The easiest place to find me is on the Instagram, and that's Dapper Dude Kyle, at Dapper Dude Kyle. No under thingies or anything like that. It was just all Dapper Dude Kyle. Also on YouTube, TikTok, all social media platforms minus podcasts is Dapper Dude Kyle. And then podcast is Limitless Life. The Limitless Life podcast with me, Kyle Smith. And those are pretty much the places that I hang out the most.
And to save everybody a whole lot of searching, just like in the other ones, you guys know, I'll put it all in the show notes. Okay, so just scroll down once you're all done. And then after you're done leaving that 5-star review, then you can check out all of the links. So, Kyle, thank you so much again for coming on. I had a blast, and I hope you did too.
I absolutely did. And I do have one message for the folks that are listening.
Go for it.
And it's how I end my podcast as well. And I wish that you all keep up the kindness, and that I hope your day treats you as good as you look.
There we go. And for anybody who wants to catch the podcast that I did with Kyle, that's going to be in the show notes too. So I highly recommend checking that one out after this. Otherwise, everybody have a great week. See you guys later.